It's time for another Model A myth, and in the folklore of the Model A Ford, the biggest myth is Thomas Edison's connection to Henry's lady. You've probably heard that Henry Ford gifted the first production Model A Ford to Thomas Edison, and that it was originally a Tudor that was converted to a Phaeton at Edison's request. But why did Henry want the first Model A to go to Thomas Edison? And was it this Tudor? Or was it this Tudor? Or this third Tudor? And what exactly is the deal with this Phaeton? There is no question the admiration Henry Ford had for Thomas Edison. The fascination with the great inventor had started when Henry was a young boy. Henry started working for the Edison Illuminating Company in September of 1891 as an engineer on the midnight shift in Detroit. He quickly proved his worth and was promoted several times. His role with the company grew so much that in August 1896, he traveled to New York City to attend an Edison Company convention. On August 12th, Henry managed to get himself a seat at the table of Thomas Edison's private dinner. Someone mentioned that Henry was working on a gasoline-powered car, which intrigued Edison. Henry spent time discussing the ignition system with Edison and eventually drew diagrams on the back of menus. Edison was keen on the idea of a gas-powered vehicle and encouraged Henry to stick with it. Henry left the Edison Illuminating Company in August of 1899 in order to start the Detroit Automobile Company, which quickly folded. His eventual success with the Ford Motor Company and the Model T allowed him a chance to become closer to Thomas Edison. The Ford and Edison families would often travel together for vacations. In 1916, Henry bought property next to Edison's in Fort Myers, Florida, which served as both families' winter residences for a number of years. More famously, Ford and Edison became regular camping companions along with Harvey Firestone and John Burroughs. They called themselves the Four Vagabonds and would do annual excursions across the United States. Ford was known for giving away cars to his friends, and in 1914 he gave Edison a new Model T touring car. The great inventor used it extensively, even driving it from his home in New Jersey down to Fort Myers on occasion. On December 14, 1927, the first of the new Fords reached Edison's hometown of Orange, New Jersey. It was a two-door. However, it was not the first production Model A. Edison is seen here inspecting the engine compartment of the new Ford. At that point in 1927, there were so few Model A's produced that these cars were being passed from Ford dealer to Ford dealer on a daily basis to allow every showroom an opportunity to display and sell orders for the new Ford. Upon seeing the Model A for the first time, Edison said, "Henry's got it," and that it was an awful lot of car for the money. Edison even took credit for some of the design of the Model A, saying, "I told him about that new door lock 10 years ago, and now he's used it. It's a wonderful car." However, Edison wasn't entirely sold on the idea of the new Ford replacing his current Model T. He still had the 1914 Touring that Ford had given him, and on this day, he was quoted as saying, "My Ford is 13 years old and still going strong. I call it Gustavus Adolphus because I drove the Swedish prince around in it." 5 days later, on December 19, 1927, the first Model A assembled somewhere other than the Rouge factory in Dearborn rolled off the line at Ford's plant in Kearney, New Jersey. Thomas Edison was there to be a part of the day. He was in the passenger seat as the Niagara Blue two-door drove out of the factory. The vehicle stopped, and Edison got out to take photos. Annoyed by the cold, he spent very little time indulging the newspapermen's questions. When asked if he was going to give up his Model T, Edison said, "Never throw away a good thing for a bright, shiny one. I'll use my new Ford, but keep my old one." When asked if he was going to drive the two-door, he replied, "No, I'd drive it in a ditch. I'll stick to Gustavus Adolphus." So this is where the story of Thomas Edison and the Model A start to take on properties of a myth. Many newspaper articles reporting on the startup of the Kearney plant indicated that the first Model A two-door driven off the assembly line at Kearney was Henry's gift to Thomas Edison. Articles of the day said things like, "Another Ford employee drove Edison home to Orange in his new car, Ford's gift." Photo captions said, "Thomas A. Edison is shown leaving Kearney, New Jersey assembly plant in new Ford car. present from friend Henry Ford. But the Kearney car wasn't Ford's gift to Edison. Other articles, such as this one from the Brooklyn Union Times, said the first car will be delivered to the Eastern Motor Sales Company in New York City as a reward for selling the largest number of tractors of any Ford agency during the past year. This Madison Eagle article said that Edison was accepting the Niagara Blue Tudor in the name of DeLisser Motors of New York City as a prize for tractor sales, and that Edison would receive a new Model A from Detroit within a week or 10 days. And Edison was quoted as saying he would use the new Ford on Sundays and holidays when I'm not using my Lincoln. But other reports stated that Henry Ford promised the first production Model A built in Dearborn to be gifted to Edison. In early December of 1927, Henry Ford's secretary, Ernest Liebold, corresponded with Thomas Edison's personal secretary, William Meadowcroft, discussing Henry's desire to gift the first Model A to Edison. On December 15th, Meadowcroft sent a telegram to Liebold. "Please tell Mr. Ford I appreciate his kindness, and of course would be very much honored to receive number 1 of his new car. I prefer touring body, color not important." The story of Edison and the first Model A goes quiet for a while after this. It wasn't until late spring of 1928 that there was movement on the gift exchange. According to an article in the January-February 1974 issue of the Model A News magazine, written by Randy Mason, the Phaeton body wasn't assembled until May 31, 1928, and Liebold assured Meadowcroft that the Phaeton would be delivered to Edison's home in Orange, New Jersey, by the time Edison returned from his winter home in Florida. All of that information brings us to this Phaeton. This car is the Model A gifted to Thomas Edison by Henry Ford. Provenance for that declaration comes from the Henry Ford Museum of American Innovation, and there are little to any doubts that this is the car that was given to Edison by Henry Ford back in 1928. Edison died at the age of 84 in 1931, and the Phaeton was eventually gifted back to Henry Ford by Edison's widow, Mina, in 1943. But what happened between December of 1927 with these very early production Tudors and the mid-1928 Phaeton that would become Edison's? The best guess we can come up with based on all the previous evidence is this. Henry Ford knew the place that Thomas Edison held in the hearts and minds of Americans, and by telling reporters he was gifting the first Model A Ford to Edison, he knew he would attract even more media attention to his new car. And indeed, hundreds of newspapers across America carried the story of Ford's gift of the first Model A to Edison. But in the weeks after the Model A's debut, production delays caused issues supplying dealers and customers with cars. Henry was not in a position to lose a single car as a gift, so he delayed delivering a new Model A to Edison, and as we saw earlier, Edison wasn't in too much of a rush to get the new Ford. He still instead preferred his old Model T. So, is this car the first Model A ever built? Sadly, no, it's not. The myth has been that the Tudor body was swapped with a Phaeton body per Edison's request. That would suggest that the chassis would still be the first production one that rolled off the assembly line in October of 1927. But looking at the chassis, it has all the features of a mid-1928 car. And sure, there's the chance that components of the chassis were upgraded throughout the years as part of regular maintenance, but far too many details of the car point to it being a mid-1928 assembly. The Phaeton body isn't an early production body either. The gas tank on Edison's Phaeton is stamped May 31st, 1928. Knowing the car was assembled in May of 1928 lends credibility that the gas tank is original to the body of the vehicle. This telegraph, sent June 16, 1928, indicates that the car had been delivered to Edison a day or two ago, and that it was touring car number 1. So, perhaps the engine that was placed in the vehicle was given an honorary serial number of A1. But no matter what has happened over the decades since it was built, this is the Phaeton gifted to Thomas Edison by his friend Henry Ford. That alone makes it a car worthy of display and admiration. The car has been on long-term loan to the Model A Ford Foundation's Model A Museum at the Gilmore Car Museum for a number of years, and is part of an amazing collection of Model A vehicles on display there that for sure needs to be seen by anyone who has even a passing interest in a Model A. So, what's your take on Edison's Model A? Did we get it right? Leave a comment below and let us know your thoughts. And as always, we hope you continue to enjoy a Model A.